Audit the files. Yes, Donald, your dark past is surfacing. You can try to run, you can try to hide, but people are holding you accountable. Epstein survivors are not just saying release the files, they're saying audit the files. And Epstein survivors have joined with Democrats in the Senate and in the House to send a letter to an inspector general to conduct an investigation into whether Donald Trump has tampered with, redacted, destroyed things within the Epstein files. Now, the Epstein files are required by law to be produced next week, 7 days from the recording of this video. But the Epstein survivors know that it's probable that based on what Trump, the FBI, Pam Bondi, and others have known to do with handling other things, they're likely going to be tampering, destroying, manipulating these files. Before I go further, just a reminder, hit subscribe, help us get to 6 million subscribers. You may think that you're subscribed to this channel, but just double check. Hat tip to our friend Scott McFarlane over at CBS News. He broke the exclusive. Epstein survivors and Senate Democrats ask for an audit to determine if the Epstein files have been tampered with. Scott writes that survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes and a group of Democratic members of Congress are asking for an independent review of whether the Epstein case files have been tampered with or concealed ahead of the release next week. In a letter Thursday to the Justice Department's Inspector General, Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee ask the internal watchdog to undertake a formal review to check for any chain of custody problems with the Epstein files. Now, you will all recall what a Department of Justice Deputy Chief Joseph Schnitt said several months back regarding the fact that he believes that Trump and the DOJ were redacting every Republican from the files. Let's take a listen to what he said here. And this was an O'Keefe investigative report. Here, play this clip.
But those files do exist.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of pages of files. They'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those files. Leave all the liberal, Democratic people in those files.
Did they visited that Maxwell person?
Yeah.
And also involved?
She got transferred to a minimum security prison too recently, which is against BOP policy because she's a convicted sex offender. They're offering her something to keep her on shut.
What do you do for work here?
I work for the Department of Justice.
Okay.
Been there like 23 years. I'm an analyst. I'll be acting deputy chief of our office for a few months starting next week. I work closely with all the federal law enforcement agencies and the U.S. Attorney's offices, the prosecutors and stuff. The thing is, it's interesting because I do deal with so many of the agencies, like the Bureau of Prisons, the Marshal Service, the FBI, U.S. Attorney's offices.
Now, we also have been hearing that the DOJ is trying to make Dan Bongino their fall guy and blame the mishandling of the files. And if things go, if they get exposed, they're going to try to blame it on Dan Bongino. Donald Trump has reportedly zeroed in on FBI Deputy Director Bongino as the fall guy over the Epstein files fiasco. Bongino could be out any day, according to Rachel Bade's Inner Circle Substack newsletter, which reports that the former Secret Service agent and Fox News host angered senior staff with his handling of the saga over the FBI documents related to the late pedo. Bongino, who was appointed to the post in March, had previously pushed Epstein conspiracy theories and called for full disclosure when he was a MAGA podcaster. Folks, let's pull up that United States Senate letter to the Inspector General right now about whether Trump has tampered with these Epstein files. It's a letter to Don Bartholomew, Inspector General. And you have Senator Schiff from California and Senator Durbin from Illinois authoring this letter on behalf of survivors as well. Here's what they say. Dear Acting Inspector General Bartholomew, we write to request your office's assistance in ensuring the public trust and transparency in the Department of Justice's forthcoming release of records relating to Epstein. On November 19, 2025, Trump signed into law the Epstein Files Transparency Act after overwhelming bipartisan support in Congress. The act will require the Department of Justice at long last, quote, to release the documents and records in possession of the Department of Justice relating to Jeffrey Epstein by December 19, 2025. The act's passage was a rare moment of unity in Congress, made possible only through the relentless advocacy by survivors of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's human trafficking operation and the interested public. In furtherance of transparency, last week a federal judge in Florida granted the Department of Justice's request to unseal grand jury transcripts from the investigation into Epstein and Maxwell. Subsequently, a federal judge in New York granted a request to release the grand jury transcripts and voluminous discovery. Congress is determined to ensure that the Department of Justice implements the acts faithfully and transparently without further obfuscation or delay. On December 3, 2025, the bipartisan lead sponsors of the act wrote to Attorney General Bondi to clarify recent comments that raise concerns that the DOJ may withhold records and thereby fail to meet its statutory deadline this month. In parallel, we write to request that your office conduct a prompt audit of all chain of custody forms relating to the records the DOJ is required to release under the act, and that you promptly provide the Senate and House Judiciary Committee with the results of the audit once completed. This audit will help confirm for Congress and the public that the Epstein files that will be released are identical to those collected by law enforcement, other than any legally required redactions. As the DOJ's acting inspector general, you have a key role in maintaining confidence that the Epstein files are transmitted to Congress and the American people without tampering or concealment. Recent disclosures have raised questions about the DOJ and Federal Bureau of Investigation's handling of the Epstein-related records. According to internal FBI emails released pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act and information received through congressional oversight, Attorney General Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel directed and oversaw an intensive effort beginning in March to review the massive trove of evidence in the government's possession, which resulted in around 1,000 FBI personnel working 24-hour shifts and required personnel to identify any mention of President Trump. To reassure the American public that any files released have not been tampered with or concealed, the chain of custody forms associated with records and evidence in the Epstein files must be accounted for, analyzed, and released. As you know, evidence chain of custody forms provide documents of important facts, such as who had custody of specific evidence, when the individual had control or possession of the evidence, when and to whom the evidence was transferred, any analysis or testing performed on the evidence, and the storage and disposition of the evidence. The purpose of chain of custody documentation is to show in detail who had control of evidence so that the questions concerning contamination, tampering, or concealment do not arise. We trust that such issues are rare at the FBI, whose career professionals have long worked tirelessly to protect public safety. However, in the context of the Epstein files, political interference in the review and release of the files, and public reporting about the large number of individuals who already participated in redacting the files, additional information is required to satisfy public confidence in the Department of Justice's handling of this matter. District Judge Paul Engelmeyer has already chastised the department for misleading portrayals of the evidence and paying lip service to Maxwell and Epstein's victims. Therefore, we request that the Office of Inspector General audit and the audit address the following questions by January 19, 2026. Are there any irregularities in the chain of custody forms for evidence released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act? Did the FBI or any other law enforcement agencies involved in the Epstein and Maxwell investigation create and maintain chain of custody forms in every required instance for material covered under the Epstein Transparency Act? Since January 20th, 2025, how many individuals have obtained custody over material covered under the Epstein Files Transparency Act? Since January 2025, how many agencies have obtained custody of material covered by the Epstein Transparency Act? Congress and the American people expect the DOJ will release all material covered by the act and will do so with maximum transparency. An expedited audit of chain of custody forms by your office would help allay any questions about the integrity of the Epstein files and provide needed answers about the government's handling of the Epstein-related evidence. And just so you recall, shout out to Jason Leopold at Bloomberg. He's the guy who made the FOIA request. And here is what they did. They created a redactions team. So here's an email, March 18, 2025, sent to Dan Bongino. Leslie, Chad, good talking with each of you yesterday. I wanted to share the below as we seek guidance from the General Counsel on the types of redactions to apply to these documents so we can process the right way out of the gate. Then there's a massive redaction there. Also, there was this email that the FBI turned over. Sam, please see attached. Also, I was in a meeting today with the criminal division in New York, and there were questions on the types of redactions the FBI should apply to these files. Then it's redacted. We are prepared to receive boxes tomorrow as New York agents are traveling in the morning and will arrive in Winchester, where they will start photographing and will start scanning and processing the physical files. Once I see the volume, I'll have a better estimate of processing times, although I suggest we do a rolling delivery to further demonstrate the FBI's commitment to delivery and transparency, and this was dated back in March. And then you have other emails as well reflecting that there were 4,737 overtime hours between January and July. There were $851,344 in overtime paid for just 1 week between March 17th and March 22nd. And we know that there was a Epstein redactions team, the Trump redactions team. Just to remind you, here's what Kash Patel previously said. This was after the Epstein files Transparency Act was passed. Notice the language that Patel uses here. He goes, we already released 40,000 pages. We're going to put as much as we can that is lawful and not prohibited under the act, which seems to be a tell right there that they're not going to produce everything because they're going to say it wasn't lawfully prohibited for us to turn things over. Here's what Patel said.
Mr. Director, our viewers also are just, they're chomping at the bit on why it took the Epstein files so long to be released. Any regrets there? Was that an unforced error? Just should we have gotten them out earlier? Just get them all out there? Just thought I'd give you a chance to react to that.
Yeah, look, this FBI has produced 40,000 pages of documents to Congress. To put that in comparison, Wray put out 13,000 in 7 years, and Comey put out 3,000. We're committed to transparency. We're putting out as much as we can that is lawful and that is not prohibited by court orders. And those are the things the DOJ is fighting still with judges in court to make sure we can reveal everything without breaking the law. And that's what we're committed to doing. We're doing it as fast as we can, and we're going to keep doing it, not just on this, but you know about Arctic Frost because of this FBI's discovery of the illegal surveillance of senators and staffers. You know about Russiagate because of mine and Devin's work from back in day. And we're going to continue those investigations. And you bet we have ongoing criminal investigations on both those fronts because the guy who launched Russiagate, me as a senior staffer back in House Intel, is now the director of the FBI. And I'm not going to end this mission without destroying and leveling the full weaponization that occurred before I got here.
Well, there you have it, folks. The audits, being pressured by Dems and the survivors, they know what's going on here. We'll keep you posted if there's any big news today. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million, and thanks so much for watching.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.